Well, good afternoon, you good people. It is, of course, Friday, Peikoff Fridays. Thank you for joining me. I am here, as always, with the esteemed James Stevens Valliant to talk about important intellectual topics discussed by the philosopher Leonard Peikoff, PhD. And we spent the last 3 weeks on the subject of how to live an atheist life in a mystical society. It was deep, it was challenging, but we covered so many of the great things that Leonard Peikoff discussed in the book that's at hand, Keeping It Real. Well, we did promise you, James, I know you promised us that we would be getting back to the previous topic because there's a lot more to say. And we're going to say it today. We're talking sex. We're talking about sex. Now, let us know in the chat what your interest is in this regard, because there was a survey. It's a little bit older. It's right when Leonard Peikoff retired, he discussed this. A survey that said, sex, chocolate, or alcohol, which would you be willing to give up? I don't know. Maybe that could be our first poll. What's your priority, sex, chocolate, or alcohol? I want to see if you match up, get the same answers as Elle Magazine, but we are back on topic. James, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you? I am sorely missing your fairer half here.
I am.
It seems odd that we're going to have a couple of dudes here discussing sex without the insight of your wise lady to help us along here.
I absolutely know that feeling. And yeah, she is. And folks may be wondering, well, is she at least in the studio? And the answer is no, she is staying true to her commitment. She has important things to do, and she's doing them. Although I wouldn't be surprised if she showed up in the chat from where she is working. But, I've got to answer the poll here. Sex, chocolate, alcohol, decisions. I'll go with the easy answer. Oh, wait, it's which would you give up? I answered it wrong. Let me redo that. Which would you give up? Oh, that makes it easy for me.
The value hierarchy there has got to be, come on. I mean, isn't there a certain objectivity to this? Sex clearly is number one in priority, and the least likely I'm to give up on either of those. If I have a weight issue, I'm going to, worry about the chocolate. If alcohol is a problem for me, I'm going to worry about the alcohol. Those are great values. But
so when is sex a problem?
Yeah, exactly.
I did have
that's the question.
This is interesting, and I'll bring it up now because this is a theme we might hit a few times during the course of the hour. Good friend on one of the social networks just put up a big post, and I thought this was pretty damn bold. He said, I've given up porn.
I was going to bring that up too.
Yes. And my immediate reaction was, I didn't even know you worked in the industry, but no, it's.
Well, I love the comment. We're as an actor or a viewer. In either case, I'm proud of you.
but the funny thing is, it was interesting to see this come up, in the rationality community or the objectivist community, but I'm seeing this more and more. So it may be something that we tie back to. I'm seeing it in the coaching community, the self-help and self-improvement community, more, and it's almost invariably men, but they will put up a post like that. Yeah, I'm giving up porn.
A little insight too. Psychotherapists are dealing with the issue more and more of what they call, and everything of course is called a disease or an addiction, porn addiction.
Porn addiction.
But the truth is though that if pornography has an obsessive quality to you, if you're using it as a substitute for actually finding a real human being, if it's, you know what I mean, if you're relying on it to that extent, then surely there is a problem. And so there is, for every, there is no intrinsic value. There is no concrete value out of context that can be even understood as a value. So all of these things, chocolate, alcohol, they are values, just like sex. But yeah, there is a misuse of them. There is a downside. There are values within the specific and wider context of our needs, the needs of human life and our needs as human beings, as individuals.
Outstanding. I think that's exactly the point that needs to be made. And that'll be brought out more in the interesting questions that you have hand selected. I would usually say pre-selected, but the jokes just write themselves during a show like this. Incidentally, I could not resist that title because I have asked that question before. Do you believe in sex after marriage? Now, I think that's only funny to you and me because the younger people, does that come up anymore? Do people really ask the question, oh, I don't believe in sex before marriage?
That raises, before we even get into the other questions, that raises a totally separate question that Peikoff is not really, it's not included here, even if he has been asked that question. How do you keep a sex life with a long-term relationship spicy, exciting, different,
Yes.
unusual? That is actually one of the challenges of a multi-decade long romance.
Yes.
A fun challenge to be sure to attempt to do, but actually keeping the excitement and freshness and spontaneity in a long-term relationship is an actual issue that needs to be rationally considered.
Like anything else, it doesn't come automatically.
I have been married for 25 years. I can tell you it can be done. Lose not hope over this, but it is a real question. Yeah.
Well, I can't resist saying you marry the right girl, and that definitely helps.
That does.
Or I'll say she married the right man.
Yes, she did. I agree with both propositions.
Yes. But that's also another thread that's going to run through these questions. And
Yes.
I may have something to say about that will be controversial.
Right.
Dr. Peikoff does regard that as a significant and important value, not just significant, and it will inform some of his answers. So let's get right into it.
Let's dig
the
into
teasers
it.
out there. And what I'm especially interested to see is, I love the poll questions. I want to see what else our producer comes up with out of this conversation. So let me start with number one. Somebody asks Dr. Peikoff, and it's a three-parter, but we'll do them in the parts that are in the book. What is the difference between love and rational sex? As a teenager having sex, how can I find out what my serious values are? The types of things that are a turn on and the types of girls I'd like. Can't I know all this beforehand? Or at least 90% sure and 90% correct? And I love Dr. Peikoff's answer. On this one, I had the exact same reaction. And I can see by the look on your face, you did too. Let me read the first bit here. Dr. Peikoff says, no, I would say you cannot know all this beforehand. If you are leaving aside rationalism, if you're not trying to deduce from basic objectivist values the type of girl that you like and what turns you on. It's the same as, can you know what you want in a friend before you start socializing with people? Now, you can in terms of wanting them to be honest, intelligent, and so on, but that still does not define what specifically and uniquely enables you to have a personal liking for a person and to want to spend a lot of time with them. So it's a rationalist question. I love that answer. And it's not just another example making a metaphor or a comparison. It's the same issue of, well, I should be friends with this person because he is moral, he's rational, he holds the objectivist virtues, therefore I should like him. Why don't I like this guy? And the same thing with romance.
Well, let me use a comparison here that objectivists often use with career. You can't automatically know what career you want. I once knew a person, we can have a general idea of some general principles. I want to be productive and honest and so forth. But, I knew someone once, an extraordinary person. She got her Juris Doctorate in law, started practicing law. That is to say, she got a graduate degree in law, started a reasonably successful practice in law, decided, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be a psychologist. So she went back to school and got her master's degree and PhD in clinical psychology, and then found something she really enjoyed doing, being a psychotherapist. That is sometimes, not always, but sometimes what we have to do. But how do you automatically know what career you want? You have to explore not just objective values. I mean, objectivity and objectivist ethics can tell you to be rational, independent, productive, honest. And within those parameters, obviously our career has, but does that tell you whether you enjoy being a lawyer or a psychologist, an electrician or a plumber, a musician or it won't. That depends on your personal values. Now, the fact that they're personal values doesn't make them non-objective. It just means they can't be generalized to all of humanity. They're your objective values. And this is true with sex or anything else, food, sex, any of the other values in life. You have to discover your personal values, which are just as an objective matter. And like all values, they can only be discovered inductively. That is to say, through experience and observation and actually living life. That alone can tell you what your values are. We're born totally ignorant. When I found out how to do sex at all, or or when I found out where babies came from, it came as a
Yes.
total revelation to me. I remember as a small child, I heard it for the first time. I was like, what? What goes where and why? What? It just came as a revelation to me. So we're born totally ignorant. We're born totally ignorant. We have to, and one of the main things we have to learn is ourselves in
Yes.
all of this. We're not born knowing everything about ourselves any more than we're born knowing everything about the world. As an autobiographical point, I would just make here that, my entire 20s, I would say, was a period of experimentation and discovery. And so, I got serious when I really did begin to pin down for sure what I knew my romantic values were. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I was getting very serious and entering into the relationship I now have with a woman for over 25 years. But even in the course of the last 25 years, it has involved some more experimentation. Human beings change. Human beings, you're not going to be the same person 20 years from now. And continuous experimentation with your partner is obviously a vital thing. That's all I'd say. You just don't, we're not born with this knowledge. We have to find it out through observation and experience.
There's an old joke the wife is saying to her husband, but you liked chicken on Monday. You liked chicken on Tuesday. You liked chicken on Wednesday. Now all of a sudden you don't like chicken? There's so many nights you can have chicken.
Oh,
Incidentally,
that's a gem.
Answers to our first poll here: sex, chocolate, or alcohol? Which would you give up? 69%. How did it come out? 69% of people would give up alcohol, 20 chocolate, 1 sex. There's a percent missing. Somehow the algorithm decided to take 1% away just so it could be 69%. Now, I don't know who the 10% are who said they would give up sex, but
69%.
The funny thing there is Elle Magazine, and Elle Magazine is usually targeted at women, but Elle Magazine Canada asked this poll, and the men were heavily skewed. They would give up alcohol, they would give up chocolate before they would give up sex. The women, chocolate and sex were 40%ers.
It's a closer call for women between chocolate and sex.
Chocolate and sex. So I don't know, our 10%, there might be somebody who said, no, I'm not giving up chocolate.
I laughed, but that's actually sad. I think women are every bit as much in psychological need of sex as they are, as men are.
Oh, I think more so, yes.
And in some ways, they are sexually our superiors, aren't they? Physically,
they are. Oh my God!
I won't go that far even. So the point is that it's sad that so many women have bought into intrinsic or religious type ethics about sex, and have accepted the idea that good girls don't really like sex for themselves. An ancient notion that I think has caused widespread wreckage in human psychology.
And even women who wouldn't call themselves religious or conservative still fall into the trap.
Exactly. See, that's the thing. Even if you're perfectly secular, it's hard to avoid the programming of the culture around you. I'm going to go so far as to say that we socially, sexually traumatize children, boys with words like fag, girls with words like slut. And it is hard to avoid the psychological ramifications, the psychological programming that such intense, still remnants of the Dark Ages, still remnants of religious and Kantian morality.
And even for people who are very conscious and relatively enlightened and know better, it still has the impact. Yes.
It's hard to get that stuff out of your head. It really is. One must self-consciously embrace the selfish joy of romantic love is the best way I have of putting it.
Yes. Now, I'm going to jump to the second part of the question, but we have a new poll. Of course, I couldn't resist. We called the show, Do You Believe in Sex After Marriage? But the poll is, and let us know what you think. Imagine waiting. Is waiting until marriage with sex a deal break? Can you imagine? You fell in love. This is somebody who you want to marry, which implies you think you'll spend a lifetime together. But he or she said, well, I don't want to have sex until we're married. So is that a deal breaker for you or not? I'm going to answer that in my own unique way. And looks like 100% of you so far agree with me.
That's a good sign.
But that's one where I almost feel like I need to explain the answer. But rather than do that, part two of this question, the questioner goes on, I honestly find it uncomfortable to hear that sex can be experimented with. Now, if you caught Dr. Peikoff's language there, at the end here, he said, so it's absolutely not true that you can figure it all out without experimentation. So he explains, Dr. Peikoff, by experimenting, I did not mean engaging in it casually, but within the limits of whatever values you've already defined and know. The person has to mean something to you, but you're not yet in a position to say, well, this is my personal taste. All you can say is, I know this is somebody who appeals to me for good reasons. I would go on that, me personally, I would say the word experiment has unfortunate connotations for some people. When I read it, I thought, well, you go out and do things. But somebody who has that idea, that rationalist idea of, well, I should know what my virtues are, and therefore I should know what my values are. If anybody has a bit of that in you, if you've got a bit of that, I should be able to figure things out before I have to go out and do them. Listen to Andrew Bernstein's lecture, How to Be an Impassioned Valuer. Dr. Peikoff makes the point brilliantly when he talks about rationalism, but Andy does a great job with telling people, you've got to get out there and figure out what's out. You don't know from books what's out in the world. You need books, you need knowledge, you need understanding, you need the wisdom that comes from reading. But until you get out there, and he calls it the explorer's premise, until you get out there like Dagny Taggart did and get out on the railroads and go through the junkyards and look at equipment, that engineering degree is great, but you need to get out in the world and see what that means to you. And sexually, I would say the same thing.
I learned a great deal from wise friends about love and sex. I learned a great deal from literature and movies, even. I learned from even my parents, believe it or not, because they really had a loving relationship that was a great model for me. Despite all of that,
yes,
mind learning, in my 20s, I still made some mistakes and had to learn some basic love lessons the hard way. Not because I wasn't given some right pointers on those things. It's just I didn't see the relevance of it in a specific.
Sure.
Now I understand. Now, after having a couple of experiences where I did make some mistakes, honestly, or the other person made some mistakes, honestly, now I'm learning from reality the thing I needed to learn that wasn't clear to me from the theory part. Let me put it that way. There's no substitute for experience, and that works for the positive just as much as the negative. That is to say, I discovered whole aspects of myself through the process of discovery and experimentation that were important self-knowledge for me to get the most out of love and sex. So yeah, there is no substitute for real world on the ground experience when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yes. Since you mentioned that, I've got to say, because I'm sure there are young people who are watching this right now saying, well, it's the age of the internet. We've got access to porn. We have seen what sex looks like. We don't need books. We don't need to study, books or movies or any of that. But I'll tell you what, if you have seen a love story where there's a breakup, you don't know anything about what it means to actually break somebody's heart. And if you have seen a gangster film, you still don't know anything about what it means to hold a gun in your hand and point it at somebody and pull. You don't know anything about what that's like. And it's the same with sex. If you've seen pornography, great. Now you know the mechanics. That ain't the same thing.
It ain't the same thing at all. Now, I'm not saying people have to make mistakes, and I'm not saying that nor am I saying people could ever automatically know what's the value. But that's the point. We have to get out there and start trying, experiencing, flying that plane before we know what we're doing up there. Yeah.
I guess experimentation sounds funny if you think of it. Well, it's analogous to learning to fly a plane. Well, you don't experiment. So maybe experiment was an interesting choice. From Dr. Peikoff.
There is some training before you ever get behind the wheel of a car or a plane. I mean, that is just, you have to have some background. I mean, I had to have some knowledge of what sex was before I even started to experiment.
Yes.
I'll be perfectly honest, my own first flight, if you will,
crash landing,
was by far one of the least best moments of flying for me because how shall I put this? At least someone in the cockpit should know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
But I'll just leave it like that.
Any landing you can walk away from.
Any landing you can walk away from. Right.
So finally, the third part of this first question, the questioner continues, well, I think I know all or most of my serious values, but at the same time, I am young and basically inexperienced, and I haven't had much success in finding a girl I really want. So does your answer mean I am free to experiment with sex with girls that I'm not actually in love with? And Dr. Peikoff answers, I was going to see if you could guess, but I think it's obvious at this point. He says, yes, you do not have to be in love with a girl to pursue a sexual relationship. There's a very big difference between love and rational sex. And as an aside, I would argue with that, Dr. Peikoff, but let me go on. With rational sex, the person has to be a major value to you. Okay, that's where I agree. A major value to you. We're speaking as an adult here. It's someone you can say is a personal but rational value to you, not just any casual person you meet on the street or that person or you found at a party. Without love in Ayn Rand, whereas love in Ayn Rand's definition, so this is going to explain the difference here between me and Dr. Peikoff. Love in Ayn Rand's definition means a person who is an irreplaceable value to you. Not just a high value, but someone without whom your life would never be the same if you were to lose them. That is an infinitely rare situation. I think it's overstating that a bit to make the point. It is a very rare situation. Going on second,
infinitely rare. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you, when you don't have romance in your life, it feels infinitely rare.
It feels infinitely rare.
What is with that feeling anyway? When you're in a relationship and you feel like, if I lost this relationship, I could do it again. I did it this time. And as soon as you're out of a relationship, you feel like I might never find love again.
Well,
How does that happen?
Yeah, you know something, there's a really funny cartoon in which a 9-year-old boy is left by his first girlfriend, and he tells his best friend, my life is at an end. I'm never going to know love again. And he's 9 years old and just had his first crush. And so you think to yourself, oh my God, kid, of course, this is insane. But the truth is you get older and older and older. And here I am now, I'm going to turn 59 next month. I've reached the point now where I do have some knowledge about people, and I have gotten to know some people very, very well. So in that sense, I have that Peikoff perspective in the sense that it is, for me, love, it reaches that point where you are an irreplaceable value. And that is, when you have that feeling, it's hard to compare it to anything else. If it's a serious, I get serious about someone, but how do I really know it is love? This is my perspective. How am I going to know it's love until we make love? Now, I know it's theoretically possible, but there's certain concrete elements that are unique to romantic love, as opposed to, say, friendship or other kinds of human relationships, where your ability to be intimate with one another. See, a friend of mine who's a psychologist has a really great phrase. He says, chemistry is the honesty of the body, and it cannot be faked. And it cannot be faked. And that is something you cannot know until you've at least had some degree of intimacy with someone, in my view. So I would put it just exactly the opposite. I would not know in a romantic context if someone is an irreplaceable value to me until after at least some intimacy has taken place. So I put it the other way around. I'm very much in favor of living with someone before you get married, because you can't even automatically know whether you guys are going to live well together, enjoy the same things, get along, have the same sense of humor, can live your schedules and lifestyles and values together. I absolutely think that you cannot be certain of a whole range of things about someone until you've actually tried to live with them, until you've actually been intimate with them. That is critical information that will help you know if this person is, in fact, the embodiment of an irreplaceable value to you.
Now, that's an interesting topic, and it will only come up orthogonally, the sexual incompatibility. I think that would go back to our previous discussion when we started this topic before the 3-week, 4-week, 5-week hiatus there. But we will get back into it. Just to wrap up, Dr. Peikoff says sex is the expression of strong values. To add to that, and this person without whom my life would not be possible is not inherent in sex as such. What you have to do is see real value that you respect. To put it more broadly, you have to know your own personal serious values, not just Galt's virtues, in order to engage in proper sex. So I think that covers it well. And I think we agree that sex does not require marriage or even necessarily a final choice.
I just have to add something. There's a story that Leonard Peikoff told me once. He said that when he was young, quite young, and early in his dating career, he came to Ayn Rand's apartment one day and said, "I'm dating this girl. I want you to know that I've got a new girlfriend." And Ayn Rand asked him, "Is it love or is it just sex?" And the very question took Peikoff aback. That the author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged could even say that something less than love would be a perfectly valid thing. But of course, Ayn Rand herself did not think that every moment of sex had to involve your permanent choice of a love partner. That's, I think, a very important point to throw in here. Love and sex, while you cannot look, and let me take the other side of it. On the other hand, another great objectivist pointed something out in his better writings. He was a great objectivist at one time, let me clarify. He said this, and I think there's a lot of wisdom to it. If you can't say, as you're walking down the street, "Yeah, I had an intimate relationship with that person," and be proud of it, and be okay with saying, "Yeah, I was intimate with that person," then you probably need to look in a mirror about what you're doing. Who all are you sleeping with, and how casually are you taking the sex thing? If you can't say, "Yeah, I slept with that person," at least to yourself or in the appropriate intimate context where you can share that knowledge. "Hey, yeah, I'm proud I slept with that person," or "Yeah, that's a good person. I don't have a problem admitting I slept with that person. In fact, it was a good thing." If you got a problem with that, then let me suggest you're not taking your sex life seriously, or even trying to get the most out of sex.
Yes. One of the threads that runs through these conversations and answers easily half of the questions is, are you doing what you're doing rationally, and not just logically, but intentionally, on purpose, not evading? You're actually saying, "This is what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I'm choosing what I'm doing. It integrates with everything else I'm doing. I have no shame and no worries about this. This is what I want." And that willingness to be rational in that way is let's jump a bit, because we keep talking about sex, but what is sex? Going to question number 4 here. What is the moral value? Here's an interesting way of putting it. What is the moral value of masturbation? That's the whole question. And Leonard Peikoff says, I asked Ayn Rand this once, and she answered in 2 words: sexual self-sufficiency. In other words, sex is a crucial need of human life, on a par with food, although you won't die directly without it the way you would without food. So if you are in this position, I'll make it from the male point of view, but it would apply in reverse too, whether you're 14 or 50 or whatever, that there is no woman available to you, that she's gone on a trip, or she's tired, whatever, and you are frustrated in this critical area, that is the role of masturbation. That gives you lifelong access to an indispensable value. Now, this is still Dr. Peikoff. It might be interesting to you that many men, I assume women also, but I know it's true for men, who are in love with their wives also masturbate. I'm not sure how often, but not infrequently, maybe once or twice a week from what I've read. Apparently, what they seek is a kind of contact, an intimate awareness of their own body, a kind of direct connection that's not otherwise available with their own masculine organ. So they get a kind of experience. It's not the same, more physical, but more focused on themselves and their endowment. That's commonly held as a value. So there's nothing whatever against masturbation, unless you retreat into a world where you'll make no attempt to find a woman. you just simply live in the world of fantasy forever, then of course that's wrong. But that's wrong with anything. It's okay to watch a movie, watch 2 movies a week or whatever. But if you do nothing but sit home and watch movies, you've got a problem.
Right. What a brilliant answer that is. You see, if masturbation becomes a substitute for actually finding a human being that you can love, that is to say, it's preventing you from finding the greater happiness. But on the other hand, if you haven't found a serious value, that person who's not only a physical but spiritual value to you, then frankly, I may as well self-gratify. I mean, the whole point of having sex with another human being for me is an integration of mind and body, my spiritual and physical values. So that if it is not a serious value to me, look, my imagination is just fine, and I can give myself satisfaction. Thank you very much. And so in those moments where we're still actively looking for a human value, but we haven't yet found one that is serious enough to become romantic, absolutely. Now, yes. I will, if people don't mind, I'll make another confession. I've been happily married for over 25 years now. And
I hear that.
I would have to categorize myself, if people don't mind the confession, as one of these people that Dr. Peikoff says. I haven't lost, although I have wonderful intimacy with my wife that is in every way superior to any self-gratification I've ever engaged in, hands down, because it's her, because she sees me, because we share the highest values. On the other hand, there are moments when we're not together. There are moments when, she's been gone for a week, and golly Moses, I just also have to say, frankly, the health experts, medical doctors will tell you that to keep a healthy prostate, a man should have regular ejaculations. That is an important part of keeping a healthy prostate. So, I'll just tell my wife, you want to keep my prostate healthier. Of course, that's never really the reason, and that's never a good enough reason. I just joke. But the truth of the matter is, what is wrong with masturbation? Like Dr. P, in fact, it's a good thing. One of the great evil things about Immanuel Kant is that he morally opposed masturbation. It is total self-love. It doesn't help anyone else. Therefore, masturbation is evil. Now, when you think about Christianity and Kant and that kind of intrinsicist approach to ethics, whether it's Christianity or Kant, think of all the simple human joy that has been, the simple pleasure in life, the enjoyment of life that has been stolen viciously by these intrinsicists who can only, in my mind, be subconsciously at least motivated by a hatred or a resentment of life on earth. Joy as such. These are reality-hating, hatred-eaten, mostly mystics who want to spread the misery, frankly. And it disgusts me when I think of the unearned guilt that these people have induced on sex in general and masturbation in particular.
Yeah, it's one of my theories in life is that if there's a complex phenomenon, and especially one that's hard to overcome, we talked about porn addiction, for example, that there are almost invariably more than one reason for it.
Right.
Because if it was just one reason, you could probably find a way around it. And I think you've named good reasons why masturbation is a value, and a moral value, a correct value, a reasonable value. But there are so many others. Oh my gosh. Say you're in a committed relationship, and for some reason your girlfriend just isn't up for it. And it might be physical, UTI, yeast infection, the kinds of things that happen. And she feels guilty about it. And it's nice to be able to say to her, no, I've got this. We're good for a week.
Yeah, right.
But also just the experience of life as an end in itself is reinforced by any pleasures that you are willing to indulge in without permission and for their own sake. And what could be more for its own sake than physical pleasure?
Right.
And unlike chocolate cake, it's not fattening.
Right.
Yeah. I almost hate to quote Woody Allen because of what he's done with his life, but his line is apt that masturbation is sex with somebody you love. And it
Somebody,
sounds funny, but it's so true.
right,
If you
right.
take the joke seriously.
Exactly. Oh, there's another great joke he has in this context. After making love to a woman, it's a wild, exciting, wonderful comedic moment. And in the aftermath, the room is a mess. Their clothes are all over the place. And the woman says, "Oh, you're the greatest lover I ever had," to Woody Allen. And Woody Allen's response is, "Well, I practice a lot when I'm alone." And that is to say, I actually believe that masturbation is sort of a test run in our own mind. As we fantasize what we would like to do, we are actually doing educational preparation for doing what we want to do and being able to be spontaneous. The key to when you're actually making love is to be in the moment, emotional, spontaneous, going by your emotions in that context. And in order to get yourself there, you take some training, some automatizing in your fantasy world of what you want to do. So masturbation is, I would put it this way, also important practice.
Ooh, now there's a great lead in for our next question, because when people think of masturbation, one of the things they think in terms of tools to aid masturbation. Question number 5. Is it irrational for an actor or director to enter into pornography? And if so, is it irrational to watch pornography? Now, this is a tough one.
Yeah, interesting
And
question. See, normally would say there's got to be, sex can't be just physical. There's got to be, right? Otherwise, self-gratification would be enough. No, there's the other person, and that includes the other person's soul. And if there aren't serious spiritual values also involved, why are you going down that path? It seems to me you're not getting what objectivism says the whole point of sex is, involving someone else, that is to say. And so if pornography really is just a dry commercial process, for Ayn Rand, every human relationship is a kind of trade, a trade of values. But when it comes to romantic love, money is not the coinage that's being traded. The value that's being traded is a spiritual one, and physical money is not the appropriate coinage for the trade. Let me put it that way. So if someone is doing something commercially, prostitution or porn, the question is, can it be a spiritual value, and can it provide others a spiritual value? Because otherwise, objectivist morality would be saying you're not pursuing romantic love in the most selfish way you can.
Yes. So I'll read this real quick. Leonard Peikoff says, I once said on a radio show that pornography may serve a rational purpose. It was in the context of the desirability of variety. Remember, we mentioned this earlier. The desirability of variety in a sexual relationship, time, place, clothes, and so forth. I said one possibility is that people could watch certain kinds of movies. I basically said that to shock objectivist Puritans, because there are a lot of objectivists who are very staid and withdrawn in regard to sex.
Yes.
You do what you can to shake them up, but it's very hard to do.
Yes.
And then he goes on. Now, this question, whether it is rational to patronize something which requires irrationality. Now, that certainly stopped me. It's a very good question. And I'll tell you the best I can come up with. Again, this is Dr. Peikoff. Can there not be people who engage in that as an occasional sideline, as against a career, or desperately need money, or see it as an exercise in acting, or maybe they're a loving couple and don't mind being photographed? I mean, if I met someone who engaged in that, I wouldn't automatically recoil, although it's hard to say why. I'm not sure I would even give that advice now, but I don't have a real answer. Maybe I was just wrong about that, or maybe there are people who can treat pornography so professionally that they're not touched by it. It's like an actress working in today's movies where she takes all of her clothes off. Of course, this is a little more, well, not much more than what you see today. And that's a great point he brings up at the end, because if you were to say, yeah, people shouldn't do that, well, then where do you draw the line? Should women be in R-rated movies?
What I love about this answer is that it backs out and says something about this topic and generally. Philosophy is not going to answer all the questions here. Remember, ethics has to be applied to all human beings by their nature as human beings. And context and values are individually dependent. And that matters. There are other issues that come into play here, psychological issues, personal contextual issues that come into play. So objectivism cannot come down from on high and give a pronouncement that says every time, there is, say, context in which someone acts in porn, that person is necessarily no better than, sex-seeking materialist, subjectivist with no serious values. You can't. There are married couples who make porn together. Nowadays, we do have, and can you imagine them understanding that what they're doing is also providing a service to other serious couples? Would there be something immoral with that on the face of it? Just for example, one of the examples Dr. Peikoff uses potentially. But philosophy can't really give a universal answer to this, can it? It really is context dependent. What he earlier said, looking at videos might be one way in which you can keep, an ongoing relationship exciting and keep the spontaneity and love going. And, Holly and I, my wife and I hate to keep bringing it back to autobiography, but after 25 years of marriage, Holly and I go out on dates together, just like we were still courting and stuff.
Yep.
And that's the kind of thing that'll keep it together. Probably a lot more tame than what he's talking about here, but finding ways to keep love life exciting and stimulating is a real challenge in a long-term relationship.
Yes.
I have to confess here that, like Ayn Rand, maybe I'm not like Ayn Rand, but I've never really found a huge value in porn. I think men are visually sexually. So if it's tastefully done, and do I get titillated? Absolutely. It's just that I've never really found a great value in porn as such. That's all I can really say. But people are different, and I'm not going to impose my, I'm usually bored every time I've tried to watch porn. It's like, oh, okay. If it's tastefully done, as I say, and if I'm in the right context, I'm a dude. But on the other hand, I don't rely on porn to get me off or to get me excited, much less become obsessively devoted to porn. If anything, it's been a frosting at best on the cake of sex for me. Does that make sense?
Frosting. Well, in that context, then let's. Actually, let me take a quick break because we're getting into question 6 here. We're running along, but I have to acknowledge, because we have a couple of super chats.
Oh, definitely.
We are on the Ayn Rand Center UK channel, and super chats are part of what sustains the organization, keeps us going, and keeps us motivated.
If you find this content interesting, if you find this content of value, please do consider becoming a paid subscriber, joining Ayn Rand Center UK. It keeps the lights on around here, and it keeps these discussions going. So Thank you. Super chat.
Yes. Well, thank you especially to Gian Nicolini, who's in for $3, and we very much appreciate that. And also John. Now, Johnny's been a regular supporter of ARC UK, and especially the things that I and Amy and you do. Very much appreciated. Johnny Rue is in as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
For $10, so that's very generous. If anybody wants to join the conversation with a question, I have been following the chat, and there have been some funny things said, but if you got any questions for me or James, Dr. Peikoff isn't here today, but we'll do our best. Give us the AMAs, ask me anything. And question number 6. Now, this is interesting because this will apply, you mentioned you're not that interested in porn, but think about regular films. A questioner asks, when I'm watching beautiful women in a movie, I am enjoying myself, therefore I need no other validation. On the other hand, I feel that I'm enjoying something I do not have and that I should instead go out and find an actual woman who fulfills the same desires. Which is right? Now, my usual expression for a question like that is, that's got false alternative written all over it. But let me see what Dr. Peikoff says. He says, both are right. It takes a long time to find the right woman. If you don't find her in high school, watching movies and the like is a substitute, but an enjoyable substitute because they project a woman who is of value to you, and that is the closest you can get. There's no conflict, whatever. You should be going out and finding her while you're watching movies. If you retreat and think, well, I'll give up, I'll only watch movies, well, then you've renounced reality. Then that's wrong. Then that's bad. But if you have an active romantic quest and you like watching beautiful women in the movies, it's inconceivable that anyone could think that that is a conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. No, more than that. When I go to a movie and I see whether it's Greta Garbo in old movies, right? Or a more contemporary beautiful woman, a model or something. I see her in a movie. What it is? It's a project. Oh God, I could list a few favorites here. But anyway, I won't go down that path. That is the projection in my own mind of my values, just as it is when I see the male hero in a movie. It's a projection of what I want for myself and my own values. I don't pretend that I'm the hero, but I do project my values, if we share values, as being the hero in effect. Same with his romantic interest. Same with, I would love that kind of relationship. I would love to find that kind of woman, just as I would love to be that kind of hero, even though I know I'm not going to be an international spy like 007, and I'm not going to somehow find Ursula Andress on a beach.
Probably not.
Probably not. But given those parameters, when I did meet Holly, the thing that impressed me was she was the embodiment of the very values that I was seeking when I responded in film or novels or in other ways. Here it is. Here is an embodiment of those values. That's what it is. Again, it's like mental practice. It's like mentally playing out what could be for you. And before you've found your value, it plays a really critical role. Even after you've found your highest value in life, it still plays a critical role in fueling the fire of those values and keeping them fresh and alive in your mind. How could there be a contradiction between that? Again, the problem is, I think someone is substituting a pure mental life for any actual ambition to get the highest actual value in real life.
Yes. Oh, one more super chat from Dante Nutali says, thank you for the discussion. He's in for £5. I forgot to mention, Johnny did have a comment. His comment is, Viva la sexy time, which I think is great. Now the answer to that question 6, of course, carries the thread forward. It applies to pornography as well. It applies to chocolate as well. If you are doing this as a guilty pleasure, if you're doing it with shame, if you're doing it as something you have to hide, and most importantly, if it's taking away from your actual pursuit of your actual values, your highest values, then yes, that's irrational. And you don't stop doing it because it's irrational and you stop doing it because it takes away from your other values. So I love that we're seeing the common denominator here is rationality. The common denominator is being true to your values.
Right.
And again, not as a disconnected, arbitrary, I am an objectivist, so I must. No, these are my values. This is what I want, not that. And that leads us to the final question. And this is a trickier. 6 was easy. This one's trickier. Is a man acting immorally if he loves his girlfriend or wife, but masturbates to imagined sexual scenes with other women in his mind?
Now, there are a lot of women in this world who would find that to be an objectionable thing. You mean my boyfriend, husband, masturbated thinking of, some other woman? Monica Bellucci was in his mind, not me, something like that, right? Right. And they'd get insecure. But let me suggest that is probably a reflection of one partner or another's insecurity if they think that the fantasies of their other partner. No. I have to embrace the entire sexual nature of my partner. And that means her entire sexual nature, and part of it was what she brought to the situation before she ever knew me. She was already a sexual being. She was already a being who responded to the world like a sexual being. I don't want that to end. I want to encourage it. Yes. If, for example, my wife says, Holly, I don't mean to bore Holly, and I hate to be autobiographical here. My wife, Holly, she always had a thing. We're older, obviously, so a lot of young viewers may not recognize who this guy is. She had a thing for Tom Selleck. a TV star from I don't know, 30 years ago. And if that were a threat to me, then her entire being would be a threat to me. Her entire sexual nature would be a threat to me.
Yes.
In fact, she doesn't have to go so far as she does do by saying, "Oh, well, you're my Tom Selleck." No. Tom Selleck's Tom Selleck. I'm glad that there's similar values you find in me, but you go ahead and feel that lust for Tom Selleck.
Yes.
It's no threat to me.
Not only that, it serves you. Can you imagine imagine her being a cold fish every time, except when you're around, then it's all really hot and exciting. And the rest of the time, I never think about men. I never think about sexuality. I never think about my private parts. That's the last thing that you want.
Last thing I want, right.
Yes. So Ellen Kenner's very good on this because she talks in mischievous terms about her and Harris Kenner will be walking down the street. And if she sees an attractive woman, she'll point her out to her husband. It's playful. It's charming. It's it's obviously an expression of her self-esteem too, but you want your partner to be thinking about sex.
Exactly. Love you, Ellen, because isn't that the funnest thing to do, is to share your partner's sexuality with you.
Yes.
I mean, Holly will do that all the time. Isn't she hot? And she'll point it out to me. Now, my wife is a very heterosexual woman, but she can observe, yeah, that's a good looking woman. And she will go out of her way to point it out to me. I love her for it. She's not threatened by me as a sexual being as such. And she sees that my love of her is simply part of that love of values. I mean, my God, if she were threatened by that, then she wouldn't. I mean, the only value is my selfishness, the full bore selfishness. You're the kind of guy that would feel lust for Ursula Andress, but you feel lust for me. Wow. That's a kind of compliment I'm giving her. And in the same way, you feel lust for Tom Selleck, and yet you can feel lust for me too. Wow. That's a kind of compliment to me.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a respect for mutual selfishness and the whole of your partner's sexual being.
Yes. You want your partner to be as sexual as possible. Absolutely. And I know there's a kind of psychology out there in both men and women who think, well, if my partner's like that, they're going to be interested in other people and my position then isn't secure and they're going to leave me. I get that. I understand that, but that's not the relationship you want. You want to build a relationship that goes far beyond that. And it can be done. But I think we covered that question. Oh, wait, we haven't read Peikoff's answer.
If I see someone in a magazine or if I see someone on a movie, that may tell me one dimension. It does not tell me the full scope of the dimensions that my sexual partner really provides me. Not their soul, their sense of life, the way they react to things, the values we share, all of that is, when I see a movie star, I can't know any of that. I can't really love a movie star. And let's face it, the great thing we get from sex is interaction with someone we love ultimately.
Yes.
And there's no threat, because you have to really understand it's not really love. It's just the projection of an image. Now, that's an important part of sex. The difference between, say, our friendship as dudes, in my mind, Robert, we can love each other spiritually, we can share all kinds of spiritual values, but there's a physical dimension that makes my relationship with Holly different and your relationship with Amy different. And it is really isolating that physical dimension that seeing a movie star or a model can do for us. It cannot substitute for the real connection that is love and sex, the bringing together of spiritual and physical values with someone whose values I share, whose sense of life I share, someone I can live with and get along with. That's the kind of person I want to have that intimacy with, not just some physical projection of an ideal. That's dividing it into two, and that's again what religion and Kant and intrinsicism do. They divide it into two things. There's this physical pleasure over here, and there are these spiritual values over here. And of course, that is the destruction of the greatest single value human life can provide, the most intense single value human life can provide, the union of the highest spiritual values with the greatest, most intense physical pleasure. That union is an irreplaceable kind of value. And it just, again, breaks my heart that we live in a culture that destroys induces guilt and shame and everything else to get people, and divides that, puts sex over here and high love over here. You look at a novel like Somerset Maugham of Human Bondage. It seems to say that's the nature of human love. You got physical lust over here, you got your high spiritual values there, and never the twain shall meet. What a sad, evil projection of things, when of course they're denying themselves the very possibility of the highest happiness we can find in human relationships. Absolutely tragic.
I couldn't agree more. But let me read Dr. Peikoff's answer, or at least part of it, real quick. No, I intentionally threw my answer in there because I think this one is more complex, but in a way it's even more straightforward. He says, well, let me get the question again: is a man acting immorally if he loves his girlfriend or wife, but masturbates to imagine sexual scenes with other women in his mind? And Dr. Peikoff says, well, I would say no, that can be perfectly moral. Well, first of all, it's not true that you should respond sexually only to your specific partner. You started off in this realm by being attracted to various members of the opposite sex in movies or real life or whatever, and that was proper. The opposite sex was of interest to you, and you responded to instances of it that you valued. Now you find a particular one that you value the most. You marry her. That does not negate the fact of your general attraction to the opposite sex, assuming that they qualify. In fact, it presupposes that attraction. So you're not being untrue. But now you need a more specific reason. And there are many reasons. Your wife is shy, say. You want a certain variety. You want certain positions, settings, whatever. And that really is important to you. Well, I'm not going to go on itemizing it. Red hair, leather couch. You can give the examples. Well, it's not a deal breaker to you. If it is, then you have to go somewhere else. But it is important to you. It's an aspect that you want to have. There's nothing whatever wrong with fantasizing that. And maybe you don't want to fantasize that with your wife because she shies away from it. So you fantasize it with someone else. Again, this is in your mind. I don't see anything at all immoral about that. She may just be too tired. Now he's going to give the same caveat he gave before, and I think this is what really makes the point. He says, I would say this: if, as a general rule, you need to fantasize about someone else, not because there's some specific thing you want or because she's unavailable or whatever, but because you are generally fulfilled when you put someone else in your mind, then it's not immoral, but it is self-sacrifice. Well, then what you need is a new girlfriend, or rather than just a pretense, because what you want in life is not being satisfied. Now that, end quote, Dr. Peikoff, that speaks to what you said earlier about how, well, really people should live together before they make any final choices. They should know that they are romantically and, domestically, but sexually compatible.
Right. I mean, I wouldn't make that a religious, dogmatic red line rule.
No.
Say you can't know automatically whether you're going to get along with someone. You can't know automatically whether, an ongoing intimate relationship is viable. And these things have to be learned and discovered in practice. So yeah, I highly recommend people living together before they get married. But of course, context will vary, and I won't make an intrinsicist rule out of it. That's all.
Good. Well, another super chat, this time from Dale Grissell, is in for $5. Thank you very much for that. I do appreciate all the super chats coming in. If you're not already a member of ARCUK, well, you've heard the spiel before, but you need to know it. If you're not a member, you should be. AynRandCenter.co.uk. Click membership at the top. Sign on. Join what the cool kids are doing. Lord knows I have. But seriously, support the channel. It brings you programming like this, including people who, like James Stevens Valliant, who not only wrote Creating Christ and The Passion of Ayn Rand's Critics, but, for example, runs the Ominous Parallel Study Group on Sundays mornings. Has participated in so many different shows, all of these shows on Leonard, but also on Ayn Rand's writing. James, your insights are phenomenal, and I appreciate what you do. It's one of the reasons I'm glad to be a member of ARCUK, besides being a host, just knowing that I'm helping to keep you doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Robert. I feel exactly the same way about you. You're one of the truly benevolent, life-loving human beings that I know. And it's really a selfish honor and privilege for me to know and interact with you, sir. To have a serious conversation about sex is often itself a difficult and uncomfortable thing. I want to just observe before we leave that the dark ages are still with us. People, like you pointed out earlier, atheists and secular people can still be themselves influenced by, say, a religion that they explicitly reject the metaphysics of, but still are influenced implicitly by the values that they've inculcated from the culture by osmosis, from their peers, from their parents, from their moral authorities. And it can induce repression, guilt, unearned guilt of all kinds. And that's really the enemy here. We have to break the final chains of the dark ages.
Yes.
It is the roadmap for doing that was provided, thank goodness, by Ayn Rand. And, she said, when someone asked her what's objectivism's official position on sex, she said, it's good. And at the broadest level, that's what qua philosopher can say about it. It's good. We can also say, be rational, be honest, and so forth. Be true to your values and try and live up to your own highest potential happiness. And that's it. So her kind of egoism says, be the most selfish you can be. Get the highest value you can get out of life. Don't settle for second or third best. But given those value parameters, sex is a personal and contextual thing, as Dr. Peikoff says here. It's hard to get religious, about drawing concrete lines about specific things because people have different contexts. But let us hope for the day. Let us hope for the day when
and don't have rocking chair sex. And what I mean by that is don't limit your sex life in such a way where you're not doing all of this so that when you're 90 years old in your rocking chair, you can look back and say, I was virtuous in regard to my sex life. The whole reason we're not religionists, we're not intrinsicists. The whole reason to be rational in your sex life is to make it magnificent, is to make it the best sex, because you deserve that. You deserve to have the best sex life you can.
Right. That is absolutely correct. Sex is not in general. No, let me be fair. Sex can be dangerous. People can treat their sex lives in a foolish, irresponsible, self-destructive way.
Yes, you can literally, you can metaphorically break your heart, but you can literally damage yourself. There are so many failure modes.
Absolutely. You not only break hearts, break your own heart, get a disease, infinite number of other risks that are there when you engage. But yeah, love is a risky thing. You're putting your heart out there every time you try. But you know something? Some of the greatest values in life require us to take rational, calculated risks when appropriate in that context. So yeah, you've got to stretch, you've got to reach out, you've got to take risks. Yes, understanding that it's a dangerous thing. So we treat it in a principled way. We're rational about it. We're serious about what we're doing because we appreciate, there are risks to this, but we also appreciate the high, extremely high, the really pinnacle value that romantic love can be. And if you're denying yourself that, if you're not stepping out to do that, then all I can do is feel sad for you. You're not even aiming at potentially one of the greatest values that life has to offer. Why? And don't let it.
Very well said. And if that's not clear, we're not done with this topic. We will be back next Friday. Now, I got to say, somebody in the chat says, you gentlemen are the best. And I think I recognize that person. So if anybody's wondering, well, Amy announced that she's not going to be doing the weekday shows. That's okay. You can see us on Sunday nights, 6 o'clock, 5 minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir. Just go to robertnasir.com. Everything you need to know is there. But James, we will be back next week. And we're not done with this topic. I think we really covered pornography, masturbation. Okay. I think we kind of set the parameters. What does a rational perspective on those things look like? But there's more to be said, James. And I am looking forward to talking to you again next Friday. Peikoff Fridays, 8 o'clock UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon out on the leftist coast where some of you, for some reason, still live. But we love you, James. We really do. And thank you very much for the discussion.
Thank you, sir. Always
we look forward to talking to you, chatting with everybody next Friday.
More
Have an
sex
outstanding, yes, and a sexy weekend, you good people.
Have a sexy weekend.